Hello, I'm Dr. Frank Romano, member of the U.S. and French bars. I'm an attorney and former tenured associate professor of the University of Paris. I would like to assess this recent massacre of Palestinians while they desperately searched for something to eat in Gaza. And finally, what is the solution to this never-ending Palestine-Israeli conflict? This massacre happened around the March 29th, and one day after Carl Sco, the Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Program, told the United Nations Security Council that more than 500,000 or 1 in 4 people were at the risk of famine, of starvation, with 1 in every 6 children below the age of 2 considered acutely malnourished in Gaza. I might add that after October 7th, instead of 500 trucks entering daily, only 90 or fewer have been entering Gaza with food, water, and medical supplies. So, we must understand, the people in Gaza are desperate to eat, notably to feed, hydrate, and medicate their families, their children. Let's return to the massacre. The Gazans had congregated at Harun al-Rashid Street in Gaza on the southeastern side of Gaza City, where aid trucks carrying flour were believed to be on the way. According to a report of Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud and by the Associated Press, as people gathered in large groups waiting for much-needed aid, the trucks arrived. People started pulling boxes of flour and canned goods off the trucks when Israeli troops opened fire. Israel said many of the dead were trampled in a crowd surge that started when desperate Palestinians rushed to the aid trucks. It said its troops fired warning shots above the Palestinians after the crowd moved toward them in a threatening way. That is a bold-faced lie. Dr. Mohammed Salha, the acting director of Al-Hawda Hospital, however, told the Associated Press that the 176 wounded brought to the facility, out of 176, 142, that's 80%, had gunshot wounds, and only 34 showed injuries from a stampede. Earlier, a UN team who visited Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza also confirmed that many victims were injured by gunfire. The truth is that after opening fire, Israeli tanks advanced and ran over many of the dead and injured bodies, according to Al Jazeera's Ismail Al-Gur, reporting from the scene, on the scene. Al Jazeera's Bernard Smith claimed the Israeli military initially tried to pin the blame on the crowd, on the Palestinians, saying that dozens were hurt as a consequence of being crushed and trampled in a stampede when aid trucks arrived. Smith continued, and then after some pushing, the Israelis went on to say that their troops felt threatened, that hundreds of people approached their troops in a way they posed a threat to them, so they responded by opening fire. But they didn't explain how on earth those people, starving people, posed a threat, if any. Witnesses then insisted that the stampede happened only after Israeli troops started firing at people, looking for food, desperately. Sky News was informed that the trucks were moving together and the location of the distribution was disclosed, and that's where people were waiting all night for the food. The source added, unfortunately, a moment which would have given us some happiness and relief that aid had reached those in need became a bloodbath. OHCHR, a UN office, stated that between mid-January and the end of February, it had recorded at least 14 separate incidences involving shooting and shelling of people gathered to receive desperately needed supplies. At the same places, namely the Kuwait, roundabout on Salah al-Din Street and al-Nabulsi roundabout in Gaza, the same places. So let's take a step back and interrogate ourselves about this. The crowd was obviously desperate to find food and water. They were starving and dehydrated. So even if they massed around the tank in desperation and not even paying attention to their own security, what threat could they have been to the tanks, to the armed Israeli soldiers? Let's take another step back and again review the origins of this conflict, of this entire Palestine-Israeli conflict. Some people point a finger at Hamas, accusing it again of creating all this, starting the war, leading to acute suffering, death, and injury. Let us not forget about the true origins of this desperation, frustration, starvation, acute suffering that we're talking about. The die was cast long before October 7th by the Israeli occupation in the West Bank, in Gaza, and the blockade of Gaza. That is the true origins of all this suffering. So, in spite of what most of the media indicates, that this conflict, this cycle of violence is all about the October 7th attack, no. It started long ago, and as we stated before, especially after the 1967 war. This conflict, including the October 7th attack, was directly and indirectly caused by the Israeli occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. Settler violence, mostly supported by the IDF, the blockade, high unemployment, scarce food and water, little mobility, little freedom, and no real future for Palestinians. Hamas, because of all that, feels justified doing away with Israel because of the way Palestinians are being treated. It's like they are sometimes seeking to avenge the Palestinians, even sometimes taking fanatic stands for a desperate people pushed into a corner, and then they lash out like a caged animal, like a cornered animal. The fanatic Zionists who started this whole thing in response to the Palestinian attacks react with the propaganda that they are simply defending themselves, and consequently advocate a Jewish-only state and the need to attack and or to kill Palestinians and eventually push them all out of the Holy Land. Finally, what is the solution? We need together to create an independent Palestinian state next to an independent Israeli state. When that is accomplished, the radical Hamas approach would be much less interesting, and it will lose much support. Why? Because their call to fight the occupation will make no sense, since there will be no occupation, no blockade, no attacks by settlers, no intrusions into Palestinian homes and into their land by the IDF, etc. On the other side, since there are no attacks by Palestinians in self-defense against Zionist attacks, the fanatic Zionist approach to attack and get rid of Palestinians would automatically be far less appealing. And they will lose much support. Why? Because the Palestinians would be focused on their own state and not attacking, defending themselves from Zionists trying to kick them off their land, etc. Finally, all we need is a sincere desire of all parties concerned to stop the cycle of violence and start living in peace and harmony. Thank you.